Hi everyone, it's Natalie here. So I'm doing my readings this week a little bit in reverse. Sorry I didn't get my cards done last week. I'm hopeful that my technical issues don't continue this week. Had issues with QuickTime Player, issues with our internet, issues with iMovie, and then issues with uploading and getting things onto YouTube. So by the time I was able to kind of get the ability to pull together the card reading that I had done for Sunday, it was already Monday night, I think, or Tuesday morning. So I just let it go. Sometimes you have to just let it go. I'm so sad because it was such a good reading. And I'm going to use these again for another one. I wanted to use the Threadbound Oracle. It's so good. But for the full moon this week, it didn't feel like the right deck. We've got this Scorpio full moon coming. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, depending on where you are in the world. It seems. Kind of seems that way. It's marked on my Tibetan calendar as the 27th. There's a note saying that if you live in the West or in North America, it's the 26th. And then I've heard other astrologers say the 25th. So it's a little bit all over the place there. And I don't have a program where I can put in my time and location and actually know where, like how astrologically, how it all comes together. But I will probably personally celebrate the new moon on Monday night and into Tuesday, because technically in Tuesday in Tibet, it is also the birthday of Machi Glabdron, who is the enlightened being over my, always gets me, over my right shoulder here. You can kind of see it. She's like the little, let's see. There she is. She's the little tiny one there. And also excuse me. Also her, the card that's directly behind the flame, that is also like her lineage. And so that's kind of a major holiday this time of year. So yeah, that's where we are. It felt more relevant this week to bring out the Troma Nagmo spread, which I would like to do and set up as like as a document so that it can go out there, and I will probably get that done at some point. I've started figuring out how to do that in different computer programs and things that I've got that are pretty simple, so that I can get my spreads. I have several that I've created, but I want to put them together so that they're easy to put out there and look a little bit more professional, because we like technology. We don't like things that are hand-drawn anymore, and I'm not always that good hand-drawing. So that said, what I'll show you here is basically the positions. So Troma Nagmo's mandala is usually found as a six-pointed star, as are a lot of dakinis in the Tibetan tradition. And so we have all of the positions that I've lined up here and the removing of the head. I can explain this one. So for those of you, I'll link it in the box below, but for those of you who haven't seen me go through this particular spread in the past, it's designed around, the figure of Troma. I should grab her card. Hang on. It's hanging up here behind me. So this is a pretty good depiction of Troma by Laura Santi or Shanti. She did a large, big painting. I can't think of the correct term off the top of my head, and I don't know why it flew away, but it did. But as you can see, it's the intent is to conquer ignorance and delusion through helping others. nice way to put things. She's a little darker than that. A little, she's swinging a body above her head. She's dancing on a corpse. This is to represent, the principle of severing the ego, essentially. And we we talk about that a lot in our spiritual circles. And I feel, unfortunately, there's a lot of misunderstanding around the idea of what it means to sever one's ego, or to, to tame it. I think taming is probably a much better description than severing, but we talk about severance because what we're severing is attachment to it. So the practice of Chod, and here's a lovely picture. It's from a book that's really beautiful. So it's a book that was put together of the commentaries made by one of the teachers I follow and love, Tsering Wangdu Rinpoche, or Lama Wangdu. And inside, interestingly, he uses all of Laura Shanti's illustrations, which I think is so cool. So he does that to really pull together his commentary very beautifully. But Chut means to sever. And in a Chut practice, you send your consciousness out through the top of your head. It transforms magically into Troma. You imagine your body dropping to the ground, and it is what you offer by letting Troma chop it all up, right? You as a Troma, embodied, chop up your physical body, put it into the skull cup made from the top of your own skull, and you cook it and serve it as this beautiful nectar that fulfills, it becomes the ideal currency for whoever is in need of something. Because our bodies, let's face it, which are how our egos function. When we do away with the body, we are doing away with the ego, okay? Because the ego has to have you can't survive inside of a body without an ego. It doesn't work. We may experience the ego waking up, and we may experience it going some places, but we can't fully even rid ourselves from it while we're still physically in a body. But we can practice severing an attachment to it, okay, and thereby do a lot of healing work on it by being willing to part with our body conceptually and see it transformed, okay, into something that's of use, that's of good, that nurtures, that loves, that heals, countless other beings. So in the practice of Chut, we do that. We practice detachment, literally, in order to feed people who are wounded, to feed the Buddhas themselves, to, and whatever it is that will be most pleasing, most desirable, most helpful, most healing, most nurturing to that being that's being offered to, is what your body becomes inside of that skull cup. And the skull cup represents transformation. But, the purpose behind that is ultimately to transform, right? To transform energy, to transform karma. So if you've done wrong to somebody and you know it, one way to right that situation is to literally to offer them your head. When I practiced Zen, before I began practicing in Tibetan, the Tibetan tradition, there was a beautiful story. I can't remember where I came into contact with it, but I know it was definitely through either a Zen tradition or it was through the more of the Theravada tradition. And the story is of a monk who was meditating in a cave on a cliff. And as he was sitting in the cave meditating, his greatest fear was that at some point he would be attacked. He was quite vulnerable in the location where he was. It wasn't easy for him to get up and move or to go places and leave the cave. But there was something about it that made him feel vulnerable. So in this story, the monastic guy is sitting there meditating. And as he does so, this enormous 7-headed hydra kind of creature, right? I'm just kind of winging this a little bit, so it's probably not exactly the way it really was. It's how I envisioned it in my mind. Comes into the cave where he is and is terrifying. It's utterly terrifying. I mean, it's blowing, fire, it's breathing fire, it's blowing smoke, it's hitting the ground right in front of him with fire. It's all intended to terrify and jolt this monk out of his practice. But because the monk was determined to be as fully awakened as possible, the monk's response is to recognize that that particular demon, Hydra being, would not be there were it not for the fact that it's suffering. And that its blowing of fire and its, breathing fire and causing destruction in the cave around him is arising from profound suffering that is in need of some form of amelioration. And so what the monk does is the only thing that he can do in the wake of that level of anger and suffering and attack, which is he offers, when the being's mouth, I should say first, the being's mouth like opens and comes towards him, right? Like you can't forget, you gotta remember the important part, right? But as the being, goes in and so forth and is like, rah, he's gonna go get him, the monk offers his head to the Hydra and to that demon, and that head disappears. And the next head comes forward. And so once again, the monk offers his head, and again, that head disappears. And eventually, the demon completely, differs in different traditions. I read one where the first time he offers his head, the whole thing disappears, and he realizes that the demon that was in front of him was coming from him, and that there was something in his own darkness that he had to face. In another version of that story, all of the different heads on this particular thing disappear one by one until there is some kind of a small Buddha that's left, or a bodhisattva, who then bows and says that he's reached some form of attainment. It depends on the tradition, but it's not dissimilar from literal interpretation that comes from the Tibetan tradition in which I practice, which is that you literally offer your head. You allow Troma to come and take it off. Take your head. You leave your body willingly. You become this fierce deity. She cuts your head. You cut your own head off as that deity, realizing that you're not separate, right, from that deity. And you then offer your head, your body, your entire physical being as a form of mandala to demons, to which may be aspects of yourself. You offer it to end the suffering of others around you. You offer it because it's the best that you have, right? It's better than money. It's better than worldly things, right? It's your human vehicle. It's your body. And in so doing, by releasing that attachment, my own experience of it has been pretty hard to talk about because it's not easily conceptualized, but it has been profound. In doing this, you find and discover so many different parts of yourself that are in need of being fed something because they are acting as demons inside your own ego structure, right? So when they're fed, and a lot of time what you're doing is you are feeding your own demons and your own stuff, your own self parts. They begin to shift. They begin to transform. They get on board. They can loosen a little bit. They can loosen a little bit more. And they can begin to see space around an idea or a topic, something that's been the fixation of egoic clinging, right? That, instead of trusting, for example, that my own nature as a human being is to be the embodiment, the very rough, the diamond in the rough type of embodiment of a Buddha, right? Just like yours is. And instead of having complete faith in that reality, delusions pop up. And one form of those delusions sometimes is, I did this one good thing this one time, right? And I'm saying that because I've recently been through this. And it becomes a way of having that particular self part, right, that is related to that experience or that particular area of your life. You know, your ego will cling to that. And it becomes this sort of crazy, sacred, untouchable thing around which I would become very easily triggered. And I will talk about this a little more in depth at some point. But being willing to look at it, you know, the more you've done that, or the more I've done that in my life, the more I've found those things and hunted them down and forced an interaction. Forced an interaction with them, the more they're wanting to hide from me, the more difficult that structure can be, you know, in terms of getting past it. It's a little scary because instead of being able to, ooh, it's very loud out there. Instead of being able to to disassemble those structures in favor of seeing the truth and becoming more compassionate and more in alignment with the reality, right? The reality of your own inherent goodness. Those structures will try and survive. They don't want to be torn down. They don't want to be taken apart. When we talk about shadow work, having realizations of your own shadow, this is hard. It's a lot harder than pulling out a deck of cards. And I say that as someone about to do this, right? To say, okay, let's look, let's see what needs to be, on a bigger, more societal level, what needs to be severed. What do we need to relinquish attachment to? So that's it in a nutshell. So I offer this as the prequel because I'm going to film the video next of doing the spread as a full moon. What are we letting go of? What are we releasing? Sort of spread, partly in honor of Machik, and partly because it's a Scorpio full moon. It's going to be an intense one. I think everybody can start to feel that that's happening, right? I think that pull emotionally has been taking place all week. I've definitely felt it. I've definitely seen that with patients and clients all week. So yeah. Let's look at what we need to do collectively to release that.